The whole world, the world at large, even nowadays, is torn apart and is just closing its eyes and pretending that it is mute and deaf. And it is about time now for Europe to meet this challenge and to oppose this. And in conclusion, I would like to thank Senegal for the warm welcome, for the hospitality, and this only adds on to the success that is honoring Senegal. Thank you.
Yeah, we just take one more question at the back, gentlemen, yourself, and then we will come back to the panel. Thank you. Please, you have.
Merci, Président.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, let me introduce myself. My name is Pape Badara Seck. I am a filmmaker, Senegalese filmmaker. So for many years now, ever since I have known about, learning about this problem of the Palestinian problems, the Palestinian cause, it's been now many years. And until today, I see that the problem has not changed 1 inch. And I'm asking myself questions about people in the world. What is their problem? One state is there deciding not to respect rules, not to respect resolutions, killing people, men, women, children, sending bombs, and no one, people are just watching as if it is absolutely normal. I think that the Israeli state has forgotten that while they were suffering under Hitler, the whole world rose as one to get them out of that situation. They have forgotten about that. And what is happening now, and is surprising for me, people who suffered under Hitler, against whom there was a genocide, are now doing what Hitler did to them. So what I'm saying is that, well, these people have lost their humanity. They have no humanity anymore, these Israeli leaders. So what I'm saying now is that we have to do something. We need to do something. The United Nations are just watching now the states that are represented here today, that are very sensitive to this Palestinian situation. Can't we start, each and every one of us in his own state, to apply sanctions? I'm saying one thing. I'm making a proposal. I'm not a part of the state authorities, apparatus. So the question I'm just asking a question. The states that are here, that are sensitive to that problem, and which the states and want the Palestinians to get their rights back. Microphone is off.
I don't know what's wrong with your mic, sorry.
Voilà, ça va, c'est bon.
Yeah, it's all right. I'm sorry. Just one sentence to conclude. The question is, can't the state do one thing? Each state would close its embassy. Microphone, please. The microphone keeps going off. We can't hear the speaker. Now, can each individual state here close its embassy until the Palestinians can get back a Palestinian state? That is my proposal. Close its embassy.
Thank you. I think we heard from 5 participants. We will come back to you after the response of our panel to the 5 questions and comments raised in here. There were a couple of questions and some good comments. I think one question was on education and making sure that both sides are fully informed and properly informed, and what can we do that they remain informed as far as the facts are concerned. Another question was that it's not only the people of Palestine who suffer, it's the entire world that suffer, the people who have an interest in freedom, and also the people who link to Jerusalem and they want to go for pilgrimage and for other reasons. And perhaps when we make a reference to the suffering of people, it should be referenced globally rather than bringing it down to the local level. There were a couple of other suggestions. One was that there is a need for establishing a movement against this culture of killing by the settlers. Somehow we need to do something about it. There was a question raised about the possibility of going to International Criminal Court. What can we do about that? And also there was one suggestion made for sanctions and of different kinds, and in particular the suggestion was that perhaps those countries having missions in Tel Aviv, they should close their embassies in there. So there are some comments and some questions. The floor is open. Perhaps we start from that end. Thank you.
عندما ذهبنا إلى عملية السلام تنازلنا عن 78% من مساحة فلسطين.
Can we get the interpretation, please?
When yes. When we participated in the Oslo process, I myself was a member of the team. The peace process was initiated. We launched the process, and we paid the price for it. The number of settlers had reached 105,000 in 1995. Today, in the West Bank, we have more than 500,000 settlers out of the city in the city of Al-Quds. So 30,000 residential units have been built in the city of Jerusalem itself. In 1995, a man of peace was killed. The Israeli society has since then made a U-turn to the right vis-à-vis a problem which was being addressed differently before 1995. And that is how we can see that the Israeli mentality is being anchored into a thinking process based on a belief that aside between the river and the sea, there is only one Israeli state, and that the Palestinians are invaders, that Israel went there to free that land. And this is the mentality that is prevailing nowadays. When we look at, when we observe the Israeli government, we realize that most of the members of that government are themselves settlers within the West Bank itself. So that mentality, which is just being enshrined into the reality more and more, needs to be stopped, needs a force that would stop it, but that force does not exist. Law as a force is useless. And it seems that the Hebrew state has realized that the international community can only observe what is happening. Just look at it, whether in Al-Quds or elsewhere, where houses are being destroyed, where people are being pushed to exile, where the territory are becoming land for where settlers can invest. And nowadays we see a lot of medias which are just watching what is happening, the destruction operations, the Bedouins, for instance, vis-à-vis the Bedouins within the West Bank in Jerusalem. And this is nothing but an ethnic purification against the Bedouins, because some people are saying that the Palestinian state cannot only exist, on the West Bank, that Al-Quds cannot be a Palestinian capital. The capital of the Palestine can be only be elsewhere, in a place that only the Israelis know. So we have handed out our hand for peace. We taught our children the values of peace, but in front of us we see a different people, a different mentality. We have discussed with our partners from Israel, but I think that my children will not want to hand over their hand to the Israelis, and the Israelis cannot shake hands with the Palestinians, and there is going to be more bloodshed in the future. We will never, but I hope that we will never get there. Thank you.
Mr. Sidman.
Yes. I would like to weave a number of the questions and comments into one answer, which is a bit personal. I just visited my father, who's a 91-year-old yuppie in New York. My father grew up in Nazi Germany. He left Nazi Germany at the age of 16 via Warsaw, Moscow, Peking, Vladivostok, Kobe, Japan, and arrived in the United States at the end of 1940. His entire childhood was under the Nazis. By 1944, he was back in Germany in the uniform of the United States Army. He lived the crisis of the Jewish people in his generation. I come from a refugee family. Does the fact that I come from a refugee family make Nabil El-Kurd less of a refugee? Not one bit. Your tragedy and my tragedy are connected. The Jewish people in this generation and the Palestinian people are deeply scarred. We've been scarred by national tragedies that are unspeakable. That's my Zionism. I'm a Zionist. My Zionism is not displacing Palestinians. My Zionism is the world is a dangerous place for everybody. It's doubly and triply dangerous for Jews. We need a state. But isn't the same true of my Palestinian friends? Isn't the world dangerous for Palestinians? Are Palestinians not vulnerable? Is not that we've been hearing? What I am entitled to as an Israeli and a Jew, my Palestinian friends are entitled to as well. And that comes to the question of education. I spend times on both sides of the line. For 3 or 4 months a year ago, every neighborhood in East Jerusalem was on fire every night, and my Israeli neighbors didn't know. They didn't want to know. They lived in denial. My Israeli neighbors have no idea how frightened and humiliated Palestinians living a kilometer away are in their everyday life. And by the way, many of my Palestinian friends have no idea that how I fear or feared during the second Intifada when bombs were blowing up outside of my kids' school. Each of my kids knows somebody killed, including classmates. We're both deeply scarred people. And a process of mutual humanization is critical, and it's not taking place. You're entirely correct. I can be a little bit cynical. A year or two ago, I was at a conference in New York, and somebody got up and said, I was there with an Israeli colleague, Daniel Levy, who I'm sure you know, and somebody said very emphatically, where's the Israeli left? And I said, what do you want? We're both here. The traumas of Israelis and Palestinians have destroyed the forces of moderation in both societies. There's very, very little pushback. But that also shows the way forward. We Israelis need to hear increasing doses of reality. And that is part of the campaign that I hope will be emerging from the United Nations. And that imposes on the friends of Israel even greater responsibilities than those who don't like us. We need to hear from Angela Merkel. You are engaged in self-destructive policies. You're destroying yourselves. Friends don't let friends drive drunk. Not only that, you are engaged in policies that I, as your closest ally, can't support. I will be powerless. Angela Merkel and David Cameron and Barack Obama and Hollande should be telling us we will be powerless to justify your unjustifiable policies. We need to hear it from our friends and our allies more than we need to hear it from our enemies. My friends in Tel Aviv say, I'm not occupying the West Bank, it's the settlers. It's not me. I'm not complicit. No. The settlers are not occupying the West Bank. Israel is occupying the West Bank. And until the world holds Israel accountable for actions under occupation, we're not going to see the regeneration of forces of moderation. This is not an invitation to punish Israel. There are those who say punish Israel until Israel doesn't exist. No, the goal of accountability is not punishment. It's to end occupation. And the world should be telling us, any Israeli who disavows himself or herself from occupation will be welcome with us. But any Israeli individual or organization that is actively complicit in occupation will be held accountable, and that means much more than just the 570,000 settlers. You are not being anti-Israel by doing that. You are being pro-Israel because you are showing us a way forward. For me, the goal of this international crescendo, reaffirming with greater clarity the two-state solution, is a stress test for Israeli society. The goal of that is exactly as you've said. I'm a great believer in the decency of Palestinian society and Israeli society. I think we're a much more decent society than current circumstances indicate. Thomas Jefferson once said that slavery is like holding a wolf by the ears. You're scared to hold on, but you don't dare let go. I think most Israelis, in their heart of hearts, want to end occupation, but we're scared. And we need to hear from our friends a very sober way to move forward to end occupation. It's the only way of doing it. I don't believe that the Israeli people and the Palestinian people will really begin to heal until occupation ends. I wish it could be beforehand, but I don't think it's possible. I don't think there can be reconciliation under occupation. But the day a border goes up, you will see the Israeli people and the Palestinian people heal. You will see Jerusalem heal much more quickly than anybody imagines. But we have to meet as equals in order for that to happen. Until the divorce is completed, the reconciliation can't begin. Now, we can't give up on each other's humanity. We have to work on that. But the goal has to be a humanizing separation by the means of a border between a viable, contiguous, independent Palestinian state with an Al-Quds that is as vibrant and as successful as Israeli Jerusalem, living side by side. It's the only way that the reconciliation can begin.
Thank you, Mr. Sidman. We just go back. We go to Ms. Higgins. I think one comment, one question was specifically reference to your presentation, and then we'll come to Mr. Al-Quds.
Just to the gentleman that remarked on the actions of Israel affecting not just Palestinians but the whole world, let's be clear, nobody is more brutalized or persecuted at the hands of Israeli policies than Palestinians. But indeed, the whole framework of international law is being delegitimized and eroded on a daily basis, and that this affects everybody the world over. When Israel can abstain from partaking in UN human rights mechanisms without being held to account, where does this leave any other state that wishes to do the same thing? Where does this leave the framework that protects principles of human dignity and integrity and justice? When any state can choose to opt out of participating in these systems established to protect us all, where does that leave the whole framework? And just to your comment, I think you mentioned about the erosion of a two-state solution. Well, a lot of people will already say that it's eroded altogether already. Indeed, the Israeli Minister of Justice just yesterday, Ayelet Shaked, made comments to the effect that movement is being prioritized to apply Israeli domestic law over Area C of the West Bank, which would solidify the creeping annexation of Area C that's already ongoing. And this, coupled with the plethora of international law abuses that's ongoing on a daily basis, including grave breaches of the Fourth Geneva Conventions, through forcible transfer, through wanton destruction of property, we, as a humanitarian organisation whose humanitarian assistance is routinely and systematically obstructed on a daily basis by Israel, continue to advocate on behalf of our beneficiaries and point out that under international law, third states are obliged, not have the choice, are obligated to take positive and negative measures to counter these grave breaches. And so you've mentioned the ICC. The ICC is one way, but it's not the only. Every single state partaking in this framework is obligated to take measures to counter this. And I'll leave that there for now until we take more questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Higgins. Now, Mr. Al-Kurd, do you want to?
الحقيقة أنا مش سياسي اللي أقدر أجاوب أسئلة سياسية كبيرة.
Well, I am not a politician. I cannot answer questions at that political level, but I can only answer questions relating to Palestinian refugees who were pushed to exile since 1948 and up till now. Exile continues from one generation to the next. My father had to leave Haifa. Today, I was exiled from Haifa to Al-Quds. The Israelis are trying again to push me out. My brother said that the Jews were on exile, but there is exile and exile. We were forced out of our own territory, as our brother Halil said, and we accepted, we agreed to reduce the Palestinian territories after the negotiations, and they are trying to expel us from the remaining 25% of our territory. And they are migrating from European countries and other countries to Israel. And there are no refugees. We're not talking about refugees like us. We're talking about the land of our ancestors, the land of our forefathers, and the people of all nationalities. We are not talking about refugees here. The refugees are the Palestinians themselves. I'm thinking of my son, for instance. Where will he go and live if there are only 22% of land remaining, and I live only on 13% of that big percentage of the territory that has been allocated to us? What can I say about the future of my children? Where will they go? Whole neighborhoods, Ceylon, Abu Jis, Seth Gerard, Abu Dia, all those neighborhoods around Al-Quds have been used as targets. The old Jerusalem, for instance, there was a limited number of Jews living there at one point. Some time ago, today more than 2/3 of the inhabitants of Al-Quds are settlers, and we are treated like foreigners. So I really am turning to the international community. I'm turning to the international community, asking for more understanding, asking for them to understand the historical dimension of the problem. If the Palestinian refugees are the real owners of those lands and territories, the others are migrants who came to occupy our land. They are foreigners, and today they want to expel us. And if I made a mistake by talking, for instance, about Facebook, everything that is published on Facebook is written off immediately. A lot of people do not really know what is happening. They are conscious of that. The Israeli media have the control over international consciousness, over international medias. There have been movements, there have been attempts to protest through the internet. I hope that a day will come for the international community to understand the sufferings of Palestinians in Jerusalem, Al-Quds. I hope that the UK and everyone will try to correct the problems that they have created through Al-Quds, and that they will make a new promise to correct the past mistakes. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Al-Kurd, for the comments. We have around half an hour, and we have to finish, I think, a few minutes before 6. We've already got a request, at least for the floor, from one representative. May I invite the distinguished representative of OIC to take the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
It's not working, the mic. Can you use another mic, maybe?
Working?
That's better.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just found the intervention of Mr. Ruwaidi very inspiring, and the reference of Mr. Sedman to disconnection from reality, the Israeli disconnection from reality, also very inspiring to what I'm going to say. I interpret it as willful myopia, and it is some kind of willful moral blindness. It is very abnormal that the Israeli in Tel Aviv sees a disaster in Nepal and they respond to an earthquake in Peru or Haiti, but they are unable to see a tragedy just next to them. And the interpretation is that the Israelis have surrounded themselves with so many physical and psychological barriers and walls. In addition to the checkpoints and walls and fences, they also have some mental and psychological fences. And please allow me to express my agreement with what Gideon Levy once said, that these barriers, and I'm going to name them according to his understanding, that the first barrier, most of Israelis, if not all of them, believe that we are the chosen people. And because we are the chosen, then we can